Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you've had a fantastic, wonderful day. I hope that you've had a beautiful afternoon, and I hope the weather's been kind to you. And I hope also that you're going to settle down and get comfortable and cozy and treat yourself to a lovely drink, something refreshing or something warm and comforting, because we're on the final part of our story and it's getting very, very interesting. Because we know that Lainey's own mother has come to stay at the Trevelli house, and as she arrived and went up the driveway, several seriously strange things happened to her. So those things are quite questionable. So let's find out where the story is going to take us. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with the final part of the story tonight. So you really think I might have seen the ghost of a woman in blue that you saw when you were a little girl? Yes, I do, Mum. I don't know what to say to this, Lainey. The thought of this is giving me the chills. Because if I did indeed see a ghost, that ghost clearly wanted me to see her. I'm sure of it. Well, maybe the woman in blue revealed herself to you, because you've always been a bit of a doubting Thomas, haven't you, Mum? I heard from somewhere that ghosts often reveal themselves to cynics, and I guess if I was a ghost, I'd have fun doing the same. Well, now you come to mention it, that's quite a good point you make, Lainey. But, Mum, remember, you were the one that informed me that Roland Trevelli built this house for his wife Nora Trevelli. They were ancestors of ours. So if the lady in blue was, in fact, Nora Trevelli, she's probably acknowledging you, because you are related to her. Well, that's also an excellent point, I admitted. Your grandmother told me all about that side of our family. I'm not sure exactly how the Trevellis are related to us, but they're definitely ancestors. I've never believed in ghosts myself, but I think I'm going to have to seriously rethink my belief system. Certainly after seeing the lady in blue standing in the window, I'm beginning to believe your invisible friend was actually a ghost all along. But I think she's a friendly ghost, as this house has such a warm, welcoming energy. I suspect if she's still very much around, she's not to be feared. Maybe she's looking out for us because we're family. Well, that would make sense, Lacey agreed. Well, since you've moved here, love, talking about strange experiences, do you think you've had any sort of experiences with the lady in blue, perhaps? It doesn't have to be much, you know. Maybe you felt as if you weren't alone in the house. Or something gave you a funny feeling. I asked my daughter inquiringly. My daughter began to laugh. She seemed clearly amused by something, and then said, I can see we are making a believer out of you at long last, Mum. You always were the cynic, but it appears to be dying a very sad death. If you must know, Luton claims to have heard the rustle of a lady's skirts on the landing from time to time. He thinks it sounds like a woman wearing an old-fashioned dress. He swears he senses cold spots all the time over the house. So maybe the lady blue is still around, as you suggest. Luton is convinced that the lady in blue was never an imaginary friend of mine and Beau's. He thinks we physically saw her, because he thinks young kids are sensitive to spirit, which was why Beau's mother could never see her, as older people are less inclined to see through the veil. I thought about my daughter's words long and hard, and said very casually, Well, according to my grandmother, Roland Trevelli loved his wife Nora very much, so he bought her this home. Maybe she has an attachment to this place, which is why she hangs around the place. I just hope for her sake she's not stuck here, but is able to come and go as she pleases, because being stuck is an awful place to be, as far as I'm concerned. I very much doubt she's stuck here, Mum. The house has got such a positive energy about it. I don't think it would feel this way if she was trapped. You're probably right, I agreed. It was absolutely thrilling to see Lainey again, and we enjoyed a few pleasurable days together catching up on old news. We also took regular walks in the grove with the spaniels. On these occasions, I hasten to say, I saw no shadowy, obscure figures or anything untoward in the woodgrove. Indeed, while I'd been staying at the Trevelli house, I hadn't heard a woman's skirt rustle on the landing, nor had I felt any cold spots. To tell you the truth, I was rather disappointed about this. I guess I wanted a sighting of the lady in blue, so that I could assure myself I hadn't imagined what I'd seen in the window when I'd arrived here. I did think about the strange sighting, and the more I thought about it, the more I doubted what I'd seen, persuading myself that after the long drive to the Cascades, I had probably been seeing things after all. One night when I'd retired to bed, I left the window halfway open. I enjoyed the cool air on my face, because some of the nights had been quite warm. I sat up with a start in my bed during the night, realizing I'd heard a strange voice coming from somewhere outside the open window. The voice appeared a little distant, but it appeared to be calling out into the night. Where it was coming from, I wasn't entirely sure. But more to the point, I was interested in what this voice was actually saying. I noticed a cool breeze coming directly through the half-open window, and the long curtains were dancing backwards and forwards as they swung to a rather smooth little rhythm, like the large white sails on a boat. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand and was shocked to see it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I had no idea that I'd been jolted out of my sleep like this, but it must have been the strange voice that woke me up. I could feel a heavy body lying at my feet, at the foot of my bed, and looked down to see that my daughter's ginger tabby Gertie, who regarded me with a great deal of scepticism when I first arrived at the Trevelyan house, was lying on my bed with me. This was a turn for the books. Perhaps he decided I wasn't so bad after all, as it was a big deal for a cat like Gertie to suddenly decide that I was obviously a suitable sleeping companion for him. I could hear the voice shouting out into the night. As with the window ajar, any noise pollution was coming straight into my bedroom like the rumble of distant traffic you might hear if you lived in a busy city, where even at night nothing really ever sleeps. I climbed rather cautiously out of my bed. With naked feet I tiptoed rather gingerly to the bedroom window, cautiously pulling back the curtains to take a peek at what was going on outside. I found myself peering out at a dark night, with only a sliver of moonlight casting her pearly prisms across the yard. I pressed my ear to the window and heard that voice, the voice I'd heard when I first arrived at the Trevelyan house. It turned my blood cold. I heard the words, "Such an idiot! Such an idiot!" Now they were the very same words I'd heard when I thought I'd locked my keys in the car, and had scolded myself, saying, "You're such an idiot," out loud. Someone in the woods was deliberately parroting my words. I'm normally what I would describe as a shrewd person by nature, that would never be duped by anything or anyone. At least I hope not. I grew up living on the poor side of town, and there were a lot of dodgy characters around, and I had to have my wits about me. So I've always had my eyes wide open, and most decisions I tend to make are sensible and pragmatic. But not on this occasion, I'm afraid to say. It was like I threw all reason aside, like a pile of papers I was eager to trash. I wish I had some excuses to explain my whimsical naivety, but I certainly do not. I decided I needed to investigate what was going on outside. I wanted to know who it was that kept repeating such an idiot all the time. Who was it that was mimicking me? All my life I've been incredibly nervous of the dark, but I have to say my boldness overcame my immense trepidation. Someone was out there, parroting my words, and I needed to get to the bottom of this enigmatic mystery. Returning to my bed was not an option for me. I was now wide awake, so sleep eluded me. I grabbed my dressing gown, which I put over my cotton pyjamas, and slipped my naked feet into some slip-on sneakers. I tiptoed across the landing past my daughter's bedroom, not making any noise, for the last thing I wanted to do was to awaken up my daughter. But I hate to tell you this, my efforts were absolutely futile. You see, when you're living in an old house, everything creaks, and the wood on the landing groaned, and 3 spaniels that slept on my daughter's bed began to bark and run to the door. My daughter, with eyes that were heavy with sleep, opened the door of her bedroom, to see me taking the stairs down to the ground floor. She stood on the landing, staring at me, with a bemused expression that seemed somewhat confused. "Mum! Thank God it was only you! The dogs were making a major commotion. You freaked me out. Scared the bejesus out of me, you did. What are you doing up at this God-forsaken time of the morning? You do realise it's past 2. I'm very sorry, Lainey. I didn't mean to awaken you. Go back to bed. I was just very thirsty. I want to get myself a glass of milk from the kitchen." "Help yourself, Mum." Lainey nodded at me, looking at me through half-closed eyes, and yawning. She closed the bedroom door behind her. I heard her tell her excitable spaniels to go back to sleep. I was so relieved my daughter had returned to bed. The last thing I needed was to tell her I was going out of doors in the early hours of the morning when it was pitch black outside. Once I was in the hallway, I went to the odds and ends cupboard and found a torch that seemed suitable enough to use. It gave off a reasonably good light. I checked there was a battery in it, and I was satisfied that I would be able to see my way clearly in the dark. I went to the front door and tried to open it, but it simply refused to budge. The more I tried to push it open, the more it resisted my gallant efforts. I felt incredibly frustrated, and then suddenly I felt a rush of icy cold air pass me, like a cool breeze, and even the door handle became so cold that it almost burnt my fingers. If that was not bad enough, I was certain I'd heard a woman's skirt rustling. The sound was coming from behind me. I turned around and nothing was there. It then occurred to me that if the lady in blue was around, maybe she was trying to stop me from leaving the house at this ungodly hour of the morning. It would certainly explain the icy cold spot and the rustling sound of a skirt that I'd clearly heard. My inability to open the door was extremely annoying. So in case she was blocking it, I shouted out, "Stop blocking the door, will you? Let me get out." And then it magically swung open. I thought I heard the rustle of skirts again, but when I looked behind me, nothing was there, and I felt almost foolish. Everything I did that night felt as if it wasn't entirely me that was in control of my movements, as if something else was controlling me, like one of those battery-operated planes that kids often fly in the sky. Before I knew it, I'd crossed my daughter's driveway and was taking the path through the trees in the dead of night, or early hours of the morning, if you'd prefer me to say. Something I would have never done in a million years in a normal state of mind, if I had possibly engaged some sound thinking. But all common sense had completely eluded me, as if invisible unscrupulous hands were guiding me directly into the woods. It was reasonably cool outside, for a summer's night, you could say, and the darkness was not generous, for it covered the yard with a thick tenebrific fog that was not friendly in any way. I heard the voice mimicking mine, such an idiot, and I have to say it even sounded like me. Looking back, I absolutely believe that the voice was like the bait at the end of a fisherman's line, cunningly luring me in deeper and deeper into the woods. I was literally gagging to get to the bait, for reasons I cannot comprehend or explain. Everything was deathly quiet, so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Every now and then I was absolutely certain I could hear the rustle of a woman's skirts behind me, as if I was being followed by the lady in blue. And maybe I was. But when I turned around to inspect the path, nothing was ever there. The woodgrove, of course, was an obstacle course of unscrupulous challenges. The forest floor a road map of burgeoning roots, fallen leaves, old logs and twigs that lay indiscriminately across the ground. Then there were thorny briars and overgrown shrubs that grew beneath the trees, that would sometimes stretch out their wooden barbed hands to grab my dressing gown. The voice I was hearing, repeating the same mantra, such an idiot, seemed to possess a magnetizing hold over me that I could not shake off. I can remember trying desperately to resist the lure of the voice, but it was pointless, futile actually. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't help myself from moving forward down those trails. I noticed a couple of raccoons crossed my path, scampering into the night, determined to get out of my way. I also heard an owl flapping its wings as it flew above my head. I'm not sure how long I wandered down those woodland trails, but before I knew it I'd reached a dead end in the path, and I was suddenly facing the most horrendous smell, the likes of nothing I've ever smelt before. It was odiously vile, made my eyes sting and the back of my throat burn. I was about to turn around when I saw him. At first I thought I was staring at a huge tree stump, but then as my eyes began to adjust to my surroundings, I realized I was standing before a huge, humongous-sized creature, easily 9 foot tall, possibly even more, and let's just say he was the most terrifying being I had ever beheld. The creature had a distinctive human face, deep-set hooded eyes that gave off a red eye shine, and his entire body was covered with thick, matted black hair. His odious body scent was so vile it made me want to gag. Everything about this intimidating humanoid creature was powerful, and next to him I felt so fragile, so tiny, so inconspicuous, like a little doll. It was in that horrifying, helpless moment I realized I'd come face to face with a grave danger, a male Bigfoot. The creature's eyes bored into mine as if he was looking into the depths of my soul, almost as if he knew everything there was to know about me. He parroted the very words that had led me into the woods in the first place. Such an idiot! Such an idiot! There was something about this Bigfoot that was so menacing. His eyes seemed dark and cold, and I knew he'd successfully lured me into his duplicitous trap by mimicking my voice, the words I'd expressed down the driveway of the Trevelli house, when I was frustrated that I couldn't get back in my car because I'd locked myself out. I heard a female voice in my head crying out, "Get away from him! He's going to abduct you! You're in danger! You'll never be seen again if you don't get away from him! He wants to keep you like a trophy!" Very suddenly, a canister of bear spray was thrown at my feet. How it got there I could not be sure, but I didn't care. I grabbed the canister of spray as quickly as I could from the forest floor, and I realized that if I had any chance of escaping this formidable foe, the bear spray might be my only hope to get away from him. The Herculean-sized creature was momentarily distracted by the strange sight of the canister of bear spray being flung through the air and just magically landing at my feet like that. His eyes were curious and rather inquisitive. He looked at me and the canister as I picked it up. I think he was wondering where it had come from, and what it was. It was, with trembling fingers and my heart pounding violently in my chest, I began to point the spray directly at the Bigfoot, warningly almost, as if to say, "Don't you dare come near me, or I will spray this at your eyes." The powerful Bigfoot didn't seem intimidated by the spray, as after all I probably looked pathetically feeble standing before him, so much so that he didn't think for a second that I could possibly defend myself, or that I imposed any kind of threat towards him. As far as this mighty Bigfoot was concerned, I was like a lamb to the slaughter, that had walked straight into his duplicitous trap. It was with the Bigfoot's powerful tree-trunk-sized legs and assertive movements that he knew no hesitancy. He lunged towards me, with his mighty arm outstretched, ready to grab me. I observed that his hands were as big as spades and fingers as large as sausages, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I knew instinctively that this powerful Bigfoot probably had absolutely no comprehension of his own power and strength. Even if he didn't intend to hurt me, he would kill me effortlessly, with so much ease, without even being able to think about what he'd done. It would be tantamount to an elephant trying to avoid standing on an ant beneath his powerful feet. Even if the elephant tried not to crush the ant, it would be a useless endeavour. I pressed down the bear spray as hard as I could, and a stream of it went straight into the Bigfoot's eyes. He cried out in agonizing pain, and all his focus was trying to get the stuff out of his eyes, so much so that his attention was diverted away from me. I could see he was running around in circles, scratching madly at his eyes, as if he would do anything to get rid of the pain. I did feel bad about what I'd done. but it was my opportunity to escape from him, and I took it, of course. I heard a female voice in my head saying, "Run, run!" And that was when I saw the blue lady standing there, and I realized she was the one that had thrown the bear spray at my feet. She had potentially saved my life. She must have been the one that had thrown the little pot at my daughter when she first arrived at the Trevelli house, looking around it with the estate agent, Mrs. Parker. It probably had been her way of telling my daughter she was still very much around. To my amazement, I noticed there was a female Bigfoot standing next to the blue lady. Her eyes were incredibly kind, and I knew at once she was on my side. I knew I had nothing to fear with her. It was like she was the antithesis of the male Bigfoot, a completely different specimen. I sensed she desired to help me escape the male Bigfoot's clutches, and I really believe the blue lady had called on her help in this rather sensitive, precarious situation. The female Bigfoot communicated with me telepathically in my head. I distinctly heard her voice saying, "He's bad. You need to get away from him. He kills everything he touches, even his own kind. He's not aware of his own strength, and he has a very bad temper." I didn't hesitate to listen to the female Bigfoot, and ran hurriedly through the woods as quickly as I could. And when I got to the house, I was very glad to see that the door had been left wide open, probably by the blue lady herself, who seemed resolutely determined to help me. When I ran into the house, I made such an incredible noise with the door slamming behind me that I heard the dogs upstairs barking, and my daughter was rushing down the stairs because I heard her feet padding the ground. There she was then, charging into the kitchen, with the 3 spaniels running ahead of her. She stood there staring at me, with wide, rather bemused eyes. "What the hell, Mum? Have you actually been outside?" she asked, glancing down at my muddy sneakers and a tangle of foliage that had lodged itself into my hair. "Look at your shoes, Mum. They're caked in mud, and you brought in a filthy trail of dirt from outside. You know I like to keep these floors clean. What the hell do you think you're doing? What's going on with you?" "You wouldn't believe me, love, if I told you. It's a long story." I began to choke back tears, and my daughter could see I was distressed. So she dashed over to the kitchen counters and ferried around in one of the cupboards above her head, grabbing a small glass and a bottle of brandy. She poured me a few shots, which she demanded that I drink at once. I didn't hesitate to obey my daughter's orders because I could see she meant business and she wasn't impressed with me. So I swallowed the alcohol. It burnt the back of my throat. But I have to say the shaking did subside, and I managed to calm down significantly. "What happened, Mum? You're in such a state. You look so dishevelled. Your face is as white as a ghost. You've been outside, haven't you? Did you encounter a cougar or something? We've had one on the property before. Is that why you're so affrighted?" "It was so large, Lainey. You have no idea. It wanted to abduct me." "Mum, what the hell are you talking about? Who wanted to abduct you? If a cougar was after you, it would likely want to eat you or leave you the hell alone, one or the other. But abduct you? Absolutely not. There's no way a cougar would want to abduct you." "I didn't run into a cougar, Lainey. It was a Bigfoot, if you must know. A huge, very intimidating male Bigfoot. The size of this thing, Lainey, you have no idea." My daughter looked at me as if she thought I'd lost complete leave of my senses. "A Bigfoot, Mum? What are you talking about?" "I told you you wouldn't believe me, Lainey. I promise you there was a Bigfoot in the woods. It wanted to abduct me. The blue lady helped me. I know she's a ghost, but she was there. I saw her with my own eyes. She threw some bear spray at my feet, and I used the bear spray to spray it into the Bigfoot's eyes. He was virtually scratching his eyes out, crying out in pain. But that bear spray saved me, thanks to the blue lady. She was standing in the woods with a female Bigfoot at her side. The female Bigfoot was kind. She telepathically spoke to me, warning me about the dangers of the male Bigfoot And what a threat he imposed! She claimed he was dangerous, and that I needed to get away from him fast. She said he wanted to keep me as a trophy, whatever that's supposed to mean. The male Bigfoot tried to grab me. I think he had some kind of power over me, Lainey. It's hard to explain. It was like I was caught up in a trance I couldn't physically shake off. I think that's what drew me in the woods at this ungodly hour of the morning, because the words he was using just seemed to have some kind of magnetism over me. My daughter gave me a rather peculiar look. I can't actually tell you what that look meant, but I know she was far from impressed. "Mum, you're rambling. Nothing you're saying makes sense. Are you sure you didn't have a bad dream, a nightmare or something? Everything you're saying right now sounds completely crazy. You're making no sense at all. Honestly. Did you drink the rest of the bottle of the wine? Is that what this is about? Maybe you're a little tiddly. Wine tends to go to your head, doesn't it?" I snapped at my daughter, for there is no worse feeling in the world when someone looks at you as if you're completely bonkers and have lost your mind. And that was the look my daughter was giving me. I was so frustrated that she seemed to doubt my story, as if she believed I'd been spouting utter nonsense and was delusional in some way, as if everything I told her was absolutely, utterly ridiculous. "I'm not drunk, and no, I have not been drinking," I exclaimed. "I had no more than one glass of wine at dinner. Why don't you believe me, Lainey? What I'm telling you is unequivocally true. You know me. I'd never ever make stuff like this up." My daughter frowned. "Mum, why did you go outside in the middle of the night like this? You're the most sensible person I know. Why? Why would you do this? I thought you were afraid of the dark, but by the looks of things you've had quite an adventure tonight. But I'm sorry, Mum, all this talk about Bigfoots, I just don't buy it. Those things aren't even real. They don't exist. They've never been scientifically proved." "How do you know they're not real?" I said indignantly. "You're very presumptuous, Lainey, to presume you know everything. You were much more open-minded about the Blue Lady, were you not? You believed in the possibility of ghosts, but no, you refused to believe that Bigfoots could be real. In fact, you are the one that's been ignorant. I think it's incredibly naive to say you don't believe they exist. Do you really think I'd make something like this up?" "Mum, I don't know what to think. Your story sounds incredibly far-fetched, and I'm a logical person by nature. It's hard to take on board what you're saying. I really think you're overtired. You had a vivid dream that seemed real to you. You wandered outside and became a tad confused. It happens. It's nothing to be ashamed about. You did enjoy a glass of wine over dinner tonight. And maybe it's influencing your mind a little, perhaps." "Lainey, I told you, I am not drunk. For your information, I went into the woods against my will. I'd have never done that normally, and you know I wouldn't have. I was drawn in there by the Bigfoot. He had some kind of powerful hold over me. You can look at me as cynically as you like, Lainey, but it really happened. This thing could have killed me, potentially. If it wasn't for the bear spray, I might not be here now." At that I burst into tears. Lainey enveloped me lovingly in her arms and told me that it would all be all right. But I pushed her away rather abruptly and told her I wanted to go to bed. The last thing I needed was to be patronized by my daughter, and her suggestion that I may be drunk after too much wine at dinner made me as mad as hell. "Mum, don't be like that," Lainey said to me. "Like what, Lainey?" I snapped. "Well, so off with me, Mum. I'm trying to understand what happened tonight, that's all. I'm trying to make sense of everything." I ignored my daughter, belligerently marching to my bedroom, as if our roles had been completely reversed, and I was the little kid, and my daughter the mother. I closed the door behind me, knowing that in the morning I would definitely not be sharing any more of my incredulous story with Lainey. It was obvious she didn't believe a word of it, and I didn't want her to think I'd lost my mind. My daughter was open-minded about the Blue Lady. She believed she'd seen the Blue Lady as a girl, and her husband Luton had experienced some paradoxical events in the Trevelly house since they'd moved. Yet despite all of this, my daughter was close-minded about the possibility that I might have encountered a couple of Bigfoots in the woods. I think the very idea that such an extraordinary occurrence had happened to me was not something she could easily digest, without engaging extreme scepticism and doubt. My daughter had told me about the time she'd been in the woods, and her dogs had been absolutely terrified. She had smelt a revolting stench which she described as a mixture of rotting flesh and sulphur that burned the back of her throat and made her eyes sting. That's exactly what had happened to me this evening, when I had come across a similar stench. She also claimed at the time she had a profound sense that someone was watching her. Furthermore, on that inexplicable occasion, she had stumbled across a recently deceased carcass of a deer, hanging upside down from a tree branch, with its innards and eyes ripped out. After such a strange occurrence, you'd think she'd be more open-minded about my strange Bigfoot encounter. But it would seem Lainey refused to believe me, and as her mother, I was offended that she had so little faith in me. I couldn't help but feel that my daughter's strange experience in the woods was in some way connected to the horrible Bigfoot that I had encountered, as it was very likely that the spaniels had picked up on his scent, which was why they'd reacted so adversely to his smell. Why could my daughter not even connect the dots? Or was it simply that she didn't want to? After all, she was living in her dream home, and she wouldn't want anything to spoil that for her. Lainey, what the hell was wrong with my mother? She had disturbed me twice in the middle of the morning, the early hours of the morning. At first she claimed to be going to the kitchen for a glass of milk, but a couple of hours later, after her first rude intrusion, I heard the front door slamming incredibly loudly, and it gave me the fright of my life. I glanced at my bedside light, and it was 3:45. My mother thundered into the house as if the whole house had been hit by a tornado, and the dogs went completely ballistic. It was clear she'd come in from outdoors, and I wondered what she'd been doing outside the house, when it had been pitch black outside. I'd never known my mother to behave like this. My dogs, of course, began to bark incessantly, in the bedroom, rushing over to the door with tails wagging. I guess they knew my mother was ferreting around downstairs in the kitchen, and they didn't want to be discluded from all the fun. Even if my mother had gone outdoors for a while, at least she could have had the courtesy to enter the house with a little bit more discretion, without making such an abysmal noise. The way she'd slammed the front door behind herself had made me practically jump out of my skin. What the hell was going on with my mother? Perhaps she'd been suffering from a bout of insomnia, which can happen when you sleep in a stranger's bed. She had gone downstairs in the early hour of the morning to get a glass of milk, but as far as I can remember, she never returned. So maybe she'd gone outdoors after that. I groaned. I really didn't want to get out of bed, but I didn't have a choice. My spaniels were making a huge commotion, and I needed to find out why my mother had made such a god-awful noise, and why she slammed the door so loudly behind her. I climbed out of bed rather reluctantly, and sashayed down the staircase and straight into the kitchen. I could see my mother was standing there, in her white dressing gown, shaking like a leaf. Her face was so pale, and her eyes round in terror. I noticed there was dirt all over her sneakers, and she'd brought a muddy trail of footprints into the house. I stared at her in disbelief, trying to make sense of what was actually going on. And then it suddenly occurred to me she might have had an encounter with a cougar, which might explain why she was so dishevelled, so out of sorts. I mean, she looked like she'd had a horrible shock of some kind. She needed calming down, I could see that, so I quickly gave her a couple of shots of brandy, and asked her to tell me what on earth was wrong. I'm glad to say the brandy seemed to do the trick and calmed her down, but the story she told me was not what I was expecting to hear. She told me about an encounter with a dangerous Bigfoot in the woods that had lured her there and wanted to abduct her, and how she defended herself from him with bear spray to get away from the creature. She claimed the lady in blue, along with the female Bigfoot, had helped her escape the male Bigfoot. The more my mother rambled on, the more preposterous her story began to sound. I couldn't help wondering if she was losing her mind, perhaps. Let's just say since she'd come to stay with me at the Trevelli house, she had told me a great deal of strange stories about how she'd locked her car keys in her car and found them flung at her feet. The day she claimed to have seen the woman in blue staring at her from the bedroom window. And it would seem her stories seemed less and less credible to me. The following morning my mother was a little short with me, but I was relieved when she apologized for the previous night's activities. I don't know what got into me, Lainey, she told me. I guess I was suffering from a little insomnia. You know how it is. I think my mind was just playing tricks with me. Forget everything I said to you last night. I was just being silly. So you're telling me this story about the Bigfoot you encountered isn't true after all, then? No, of course it's not true, sweetheart. It was just a nightmare I was having. But at the time it felt very real, didn't it? My mother said rather too quickly, and I wasn't sure whether to believe her or not, as my mother refused to look at me in the eyes when she was talking. She was just trying to fob me off. That was clear. Well, that's dreams for you, Mum, I said. They can feel very real. Over breakfast my mother made a poor showing of her bacon and eggs, barely touching them, and she pushed them to one side, claimed she wasn't hungry. She seemed listless and subdued, her skin deathly pale. I began to wonder if my mother was humouring me, telling me what I wanted to hear, as I had doubted her story about the male Bigfoot. But it was the way she was behaving on this morning, like someone suffering the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, and I began to privately wonder if the story my mother had told me last night was in fact true. Don't be ridiculous, I told myself. There's no way my mum's story is true. But something inside of me felt very certain that my mother had definitely seen something last night. But what it was, even I couldn't be sure. She had claimed she'd been enticed out of the house by a male Bigfoot, as if he had assumed control over her mind. It was after I finished breakfast that I told myself I needed to go into the woods to investigate everything, see if I could find any physical evidence that might lend some weight to my mother's far-fetched story. My mother looked up at me from the breakfast table, as I called the dogs to my side, and told her that I was going out for a moment. I'm taking the dogs for a walk in the woods, I told her. Oh, you can't do that, Lainey, my mother cried in a panic. It's not safe in there. But you told me your story about the Bigfoot isn't true. My mother's face reddened, and she popped a canister of bear spray in my hand. If you see anything, you need to use the bear spray, she insisted. As I walked in the woods with my 3 dogs at my side, running around the trail, I heard the rustle of a woman's skirts behind me, which was the sound Luton often claimed to hear on the landing. When I turned around, I couldn't believe it. I saw the lady in blue, as I'd seen her as a girl. I couldn't believe she was real. She beckoned to me to follow her, and I did so, but then she vanished before my very eyes. And then I saw it, lying on the ground, a deceased male Bigfoot. My dogs were sniffing at the decaying corpse. They were making strange whimpering sounds. The Bigfoot's corpse was massive, and it stunk to high heaven. Honestly, I was so shocked by what I was seeing. I hurried back to the house to tell my mother what I'd found, but when we both returned to the woods together, the corpse of the Bigfoot had all but gone. I saw him. I promise you I saw him. He was over there, I told my mother. I don't know why he's gone, but I saw him with my own eyes. I believe you, Lainey, my mother said. I think the female Bigfoot must have managed to kill him when his eyesight was impaired. It put the Bigfoot in a vulnerable position, I suppose, so he was probably quite easy to take down. That must have happened, I agreed. At least he no longer imposes a threat to us, now that he's gone for good. I have lived in the Trevelli house for many years now, with my husband and 3 children. My kids claim to have seen the blue lady, and my son saw the Bigfoot in the woods once, the female one, who smiled at him. So I guess the female Bigfoot is still very much out there. But that awful Bigfoot that was after me, the Bigfoot that imposed a threat to my safety and to my life, is at least long since gone. But the most interesting thing of all is my husband found a photograph in the archives that confirmed that the woman in blue is definitely the late Nora Trevelli. So maybe she's keeping an eye on us, as after all, we are related. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.